I'm cool.
So, good morning, everyone.
Poorly lit.
Welcome once again to our weekly webinar. John sorting out his lighting. I should say straight away that John has actually flown back to the USA, and therefore he has kindly agreed to get out of his bed at a very unearthly hour. I'm sure something like 5 a.m. In Pennsylvania. So imagine it's still dark outside, hence you're getting your lighting sorted.
It is. It is.
And you were saying not only is it
It's also
dark,
a temporary location, so I don't have the full setup.
Right, very good, very good. So not only is it dark, but it's also a bit cold, you were saying earlier, so you're the throes of winter.
Correct. It should ice over and things like that a little later in the year. So.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, so another packed webinar this morning. This is our one before the last one next Thursday, and we've got a special treat for you for the last one, but we'll keep that to the very end. So for today, we are doing what we're calling the lessons from the lockdown, and it's a little bit of a quick run through 2020, and again emphasizing Leo crowdfunding, LEO, learn, earn, own. These webinars have been very much about education and just providing a platform for people to learn and to increase their knowledge, whether they're fundraisers or investors, it doesn't really matter. It's about providing information. So if I go on to the next slide. Really, John, what actually struck me when Aisha started to prepare this for us, and again, if people have any comments, again, I'll be really keen to get comments today. Please go into the Q&A, leave your comments. We don't use the chat box for these. It's better in the Q&A, so please give us interaction today. If you have any issues with sound or anything like that, again, just pop it into the Q&A. So John, what struck me when Aisha started to prepare this, we have actually done 40 webinars this year, 40 live webinars. I thought was crazy.
Actually, 40 does sound like a lot. And the other reason it sounds like a lot is because we do this on a weekly basis, and I think there was 1 week we didn't have one. So that means we started quite early in 2020 to accumulate 40. So that part I sort of didn't really internalize.
Yeah, no, I went through it, and it's a lot of material. So really, I think going back over review is very beneficial because we have had some fantastic guests on this webinar. I mean, it's something that we hemmed and hawed about even doing. Was there value? Lockdown was a completely new concept, and stuck at home, not being able to travel, and a lot of people sort of immediately pivoted, and it was almost like you're getting 100 emails a day of people promoting live broadcasts. But we felt, yes, there's a need to keep in touch with our fundraisers and investors. We felt there was value, and we decided just to do the first month just to test it. And really, it's grown into something I think that's been exceptionally valuable. And we really have had some fantastic guests on over the year.
Did you want me to say something about those guests, or did you want to just show those guests?
Well, we'll show some of the guests. Unfortunately, we can't show all of them because we haven't time to go through 40. But in terms of the quality of the guests, I mean, you're very much in this space. You run your own monthly network, probably the premier monthly network in London. You do a lot of webinars. So in terms of what we've covered, the material, the guests, what's your takeaway on that?
Well, I'm going to go to a slightly different angle. There was quite a range of guests, and they covered a number of different topics. I remember taking notes during some of the different talks that people provided. But at the same time, it was also because it's a weekly event, we could get into like, what are they actually doing now and what's working for them, or what are they seeing? And I thought it was an interesting opportunity to get quite a range of perspective. And as the years played out, what is really clear is that we're able to see more than at my monthly meeting, because classically, if you're in central London on a Tuesday night, there would be a very sort of London focus, where this has provided a format for people from all different backgrounds. Particularly one guy I remember from Scotland talking about commercial and some deals he was working on. We don't normally get that conversation going on in a local meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. And I just had a quick look at the attendees today. And one thing I think that has proven valuable, there's actually a number of attendees today who were actually our guests on the webinar at some point last year, and they've chosen to kind of tune in from time to time, just to again catch up what we're doing. So we really have created a bit of a community that sort of log in here on a Thursday morning. So before we move into the summaries, we have a YouTube channel. Aisha, who you'll hear from later, will be developing this as one of the main things we want to shift to in 2021. The vast majority of our webinars in 2020 are already there. So you can go onto our YouTube channel, you can look at different guests, different topics, and sort of literally in 30 minutes get the overview, the sort of the high level takeaways from the webinars. From next week, we're actually going to go live on YouTube and live on Facebook. Next week is sort of our first test before moving into 2021. So if you haven't already, do us a massive favor and go on and hit the subscribe button on YouTube. YouTube, depending on the numbers you have as subscribers, you actually get different features unlocked to you. So we want to drive up our subscriber list. So I expect to see the numbers move after the webinar today. So please do us a favor and do that for us. Okay, so we've picked literally about sort of 7 or 8 of the guests because we didn't have time to do all of them, obviously. But in no particular order, we've just fired them up here. So I think one of the most interesting guests, John, we had, I know he's a friend of yours and you've done some events with him, some training events, Angus Griffin. Do you want to just explain briefly who Angus is, and then we can cover some of his key takeaways?
So Angus graduated with a law degree and then went through the process by which you become a full lawyer. And he did that and worked in financial services for one of the Magic Circle law firms for 5 years before joining the FCA. And he spent 10 years at the FCA. He's running a team there, or a section of the FCA, which focused on enforcement. After the FCA, so about a year and a half, 2 years ago, he switched to being a full-time landlord. So he's sort of poacher becomes gamekeeper or that sort of thing. And he knows how the FCA rules work and the practices work for going after enforcement cases, because he did that. And he also wrote the manual for that. And he knows how property investors like to raise money. So it was a very interesting talk about where that fine line is between, oh, you can do anything because it's real estate, versus no, this is an FCA regulated activity. Yeah,
and I think for me, the key takeaway, he obviously mentioned the 3 main areas that the FCA are interested in, the promotion, the advising, and the tech investment schemes. And I suppose the real lesson of what he talked about was that fundraisers in particular, they need to be aware of the latest FCA regulations. I mean, it's as simple as that. You can't afford to ignore these areas, compliance, regulation, and ignorance is no excuse under the law. It's probably the best way of summarizing his webinar. So he certainly pointed, I think he raised a lot of points that some fundraisers hadn't even really thought of before, and he gave them something to think about when it comes to raising funds.
He sent a link just through 2 days ago, because we were trading some emails, and it's a recent court case. The FCA is going after a care home provider who has violated the collective investment scheme rules.
Interesting. So that was Angus Griffin. Dan Taylor is someone that John and I both know. I've got to know him quite well over the last probably year or so. And John specializes in commercial, Dan specializes in commercial property in Scotland. And again, give a very interesting insight, not just into commercial in general, but he told a story, John, if you remember, about how one of his sort of client, he advised him on how to actually increase his rent in the COVID pandemic. Can you remember that? Can you just recall that story just briefly?
Yeah. So Dan has a person he works with who had I think it's 4 small, not retail, but offices, but it's just sort of the type of walk-in type clients almost. So accountancy was one, and 3 other businesses, and they all basically had a COVID rent holiday. And because the owner of the building actually wasn't under any real pressure from a cash flow point of view, they went back to those tenants. They agreed new terms, which bumped, instead of the £4,000 of missing rent, effectively, they were able to bump the value of the building by 40,000 because they signed them up on new leases, small change in the terms and conditions when it comes to the income stream, which uplifted the value in the COVID period.
So it was very much a win-win for the tenants because it helped them in their current cash flow, but it was a huge win for the landlord because they increased value and increased rent over time. So, Dan's probably key takeaway was thinking outside the box, coming at problems and thinking of different types of solutions. And I think he certainly got a great mind for that and applies that logic when it comes to commercial property, which was very, very interesting. Now, another, has to be one of my favorite guests was Chris Clayhorn. Again, I know you obviously know Chris well, and I think the reason that Chris was so relevant to me, John, was that we both got involved in buy-to-let property literally in the same year, back in 2000. Okay. Our journeys have went different directions. I ended up jumping in and out into a whole range of different property sectors to where I am today. Chris stuck at one strategy effectively, and obviously now he's quite open about the fact he's got a portfolio of about 14 million, probably around about 60% of that is bank lending. So he's in a very, very nice financial position, but a real expert, a real knowledgeable person on that sort of low-end portfolio building in the Northeast, sort of sub 100K. So I know you've worked with Chris as well. What about him has struck you, and what was the key takeaways from his time with us?
Well, there's a few things. One is he is playing the long game. Another is his portfolio is 80-something, almost 90-something% LHA type housing when it comes to state subsidized or state supported. So during the COVID period, he saw almost zero or close to zero impact on rental income, which was attractive as a landlord. He has over 100 properties, so we're talking a significant number when it comes to possible people not paying, and he didn't have that problem. And then last thing is he was one of those people that thought, COVID's one of these flu things, he'll be fine. And he did come down with it. He almost ended up in the hospital twice with emergency call outs for the ambulance service. So, it's been a turbulent year for him, but one of the things he took away from is his business was very stable. Even when he was ill, it was ticking over, continued to pay the bills and all the rest of it. So he's created a business that doesn't need him on a day-to-day basis, and at the same time is stable income.
Mm-hmm. And so focused on his strategy. We talk a lot about strategy and property and what's the latest strategy, and there's any amount of courses on the new strategy. Chris literally focuses on, I want to call it the most sort of tried and tested, mainstream, non-exciting, no bells, flashes, and whistles. It's just literally good old-fashioned buy-to-let at 60, 70K, rent them, look after your tenants, and play the long game.
Yep. Yes, and he is able to buy some at a discount, but otherwise it's a very vanilla focus.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, then quite recently we had Tatiana Atalon, and Tatiana is someone who probably is at the complete different extreme to Chris, focuses very much on a very narrow niche part of the market, looking for usually single dwellings, finishes them to an exceptionally high standard, and really goes for that value add in design and experience. And we discussed around her strategy, the current trend. I know that's something you've talked about at some of your events, of because of COVID, there are people, an increased amount of people who are looking to get out of the city and have a property perhaps is on the edge of the city where they can still commute, but it gives them bigger rooms and of course a garden. And this is something that you've talked about a lot.
Oh, it's an interesting contrast, the two on the page here. I didn't think of this. The Tatiana is very much design led. It's about a stylish home. It's about turning an ugly sort of bones of a property into something very desirable as a family home. As you mentioned, these are properties that are within about a 30-minute commuting distance of central London. So it makes it very easy for people to get into work, but also in this COVID period, these are the style homes where people can work from home, the children can be at home, and everybody's not climbing on top of each other. So it's a very design focused, but lifestyle type project compared to what Chris is dealing with, which are much more closer to terraced homes.
Yeah, no, very much so. It's an interesting contrast, and yet there's obviously a place for both, and that's one of the beauties of property, that there isn't, it's such a diverse opportunity. But the key is, become an expert in one strategy primarily. You might want to have a few up your sleeve, but don't try and be a jack of all trades. Focus on one and get good at it, become professional, become an expert, and that's a better path to success than thinking you can maybe attend an online webinar for 2 days and all of a sudden you're an expert in a niche within the world of property. So again, keen to hear any feedback from some of the attendees, any comments, any of the.
We did have an earlier Q&A from Ian about seeing me in the morning. I guess this is the first time he's ever gotten to see me right out of bed.
I would imagine so. The far side of the world that enjoys the technology. I must say you're looking very smiley and fresh for 5 a.m. in America, to be fair.
Well, I am jet lagged, so waking up at this hour is almost normal.
Yeah, there's always that. True. Okay. Then we had a couple of sort of guests which are very, very different. And first of all, we had Aisha Fahmi, who is also my co-director within Leo Crowdfunding. Aisha is a very successful businesswoman in the world of property investment. She has a couple of personal networks that she's set up. She comes from a very strong corporate background in Goldman Sachs, dealing with high net worth. She's done property retail and investing for high net worths, etc. So very interesting background, and she talked a lot about the investor mindset. What do investors look for in deals? And sometimes the fundraisers don't think about that. They've got their own story they're trying to tell, their own starring in their own film, if you like, and they don't take time to really understand what do investors want. And I think John and Aisha really focused on just some of the key fundamentals that investors look for, particularly in what we call vanilla projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And funny enough, when we get to Ian, it's a little bit the same, that when you're trying to raise money, you need to think more about what effectively your customers want rather than what you have or what you are trying to sell them. So focus on their requirements, understand how to structure the deal or put together the proposal to them so that it resonates with what the investors actually want. And there's a number of factors, and both Aisha and Ian covered some of this. And if people go to the recordings, they can listen to what they had to say.
Yeah. So moving on to Ian, then I'll let you take a lead on that one, because you and him are sort of very similar in your backgrounds and your mindset on this topic of how do you actually, what are the metrics for analyzing returns? So
I'm not a CFA. Ian's a CFA. CFA is a very exclusive tribe of people. So Ian comes from a background of fund management, different sectors, different sort of types of investments, and maybe the overlap is we're both sort of we lean towards the numerical, how to measure things, how to calculate things, what metrics are actually relevant, and how to sort of have a perspective about investment. Ian's a full-time investor, so if you have a chance to get to know him, it'd be good, because then you'd really start to understand how professional investors think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking Ian would be happy if you reach out to him on LinkedIn. And we on certainly one, I think Ian on for maybe two webinars, we talked about this whole MIRR versus ROI, and how if it's a 1 year property investment, then perhaps return on investment ROI works. But if it's a 5 year investment and you get some of your money back during the project, how do you rightly do the metrics on that? How do you successfully analyze your investment and the return? And it does get quite complicated sometimes.
Well, a simple way to think of it is ROI only works on essentially a 1 year project. Once you get past 1 year, then you have lots of time impact. And particularly if you have refinancing or anything else, ROI has no way of filtering that in, where MIRR is designed to handle that scenario. So if that's your project, then you need to use the right metric.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. So that was certainly very, very valuable. Then we had Tina Wenham was on one of the days, and Tina comes from primarily a management and letting background, but had been involved in over 2,000 property transactions in her time. So again, very, very experienced. And she talked a lot about the HMO conversion market. Again, I think for me, John, one of the takeaways is that her and her partner Andy, who we'll see in the next slide, again, focus very much on their own area. Don't get sidetracked into other parts of the UK. They've got their own area where they're almost experts and just so knowledgeable, and they just stick to what they know works and do more of that as opposed to diversifying too much.
Yeah, I mean, there's South Coast, the Brighton area, left and right of Brighton. And what you'll find is that most successful people who do really well over time tend to stick to their knitting or focus on their niche, and they understand it to an extra level of competence, which then allows them to see opportunities that others miss because most people don't have the in-depth knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so then we had Karen and Antoine Defresney. Again, I know Karen helps you run your monthly network. You know them very, very well, but very strong professional background, barrister working in a bank, but who also are very active property investors and do a lot through property crowdfunding. And their passion has been trying to educate fundraisers on presenting their deals better. I know, again, that's something sort of a passion that you have shared, that communication between the fundraiser and the investor and presenting the accurate information for investors to actually review.
One of the keys to why they focus there is they've actually had a problem of they have more money than they can find deals that are worth investing in. So they've been successful in their careers, they save money, they have done well, and now they're trying to invest in property deals and they can't find enough legitimate deals that are worth investing in. The other thing is they also are classic professionals. They don't go all in on the first deal. So they want to start out a few relationships, see how things perform, see how they progress. So they get frustrated by essentially the crap that was coming across their desk, and they now have a program to teach people like, this is how you need to present your information, because investors like them won't be interested if you don't present it well.
Yeah. No, again, it was very, very interesting to see things from their mindset. And then there was Andy Babayan, and an interesting guy from my perspective, given we both spent some time in the military. I was infantry, but you can see that Andy was very much Army bomb disposal officer, which is a whole new level of risk from anything I was involved in. And as well as now being property professional, but he kind of brought his risk background, his risk management, risk mitigation, and showed how he applies that to his property business. And that was a fascinating insight from someone with his kind of risk background.
And he really does focus on what is the probability something will happen and what's the impact if it does happen. So it's all about being able to be nimble and adjust to the market, adjust to the situation, contractor gets ill or whatever it is, but at the same time, understanding up front how to manage all that, how to communicate.
Yeah. And then we literally finished the last couple of weeks doing a around the regions, which again I thought was really, really interesting, very, very valuable. We had Barry Duddy from Scotland, we had Laura and Tanya from Northern Ireland, we had Derry from Wales, and then Alex from England. And it was interesting to see the similarities in each market, but also the differences in each market. And we sometimes tend to forget that. We talk about the UK market and even from a country point of view, but there's so many different nuances within regions, within cities, with the country. I think that really came out as we look across those 4 weeks that we did.
It's definitely true. And if you look at the price points and the types of projects and things that people are involved in, I would say that there was quite a difference in specialty or focus, which was not just because of the region. And in fact, in particular, it wasn't dictated by a region, but for whatever reason, each team or individual picked a certain strategy as their main strategy, and they know it well and they execute it well in their market. So.
Yeah, no, very much so. So again, let me emphasize to everyone, all these guests, all these webinars you can access from our YouTube channel. So if there's one particularly caught your eye, or John or I have said something about a particular guest that you want to know more about, just go into our YouTube channel and you'll be able to find it and be able to watch that. That's all part of the service we wish to provide, the education, the learning. That's what we're about at Leo Crowdfunding. So please feel free to access and get the value of that. And of course, sort of during it, John and I are making comments, and John particularly brings a real expertise because of his background with some of the guest interactions. So there's a lot of value that can be gleaned over that. I'd say, John, if you took all your comments on our webinar during the year, there's probably the makings of a book there.
I'll need a ghostwriter. So if anybody out there knows how to do that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, great. So Aisha, if you could join us now, please. Thank you for sitting pasty in the background. So those of you who are regular attendees know Aisha is our online marketing manager, and joined us recently and has made a really positive impact on our social media in terms of frequency, in terms of the quality of the assets. And I'm sure you've noticed already, as we've talked about this project, just introducing things like CGIs and things like that. So Aisha, really good job you've done with us. So we have this project. I'll let you just explain very briefly the key points, and then I think there's a webinar coming up.
Sure. So Oak Gardens, so this is quite a new project that we've got coming up for raise in Shenfield, Essex. This is being developed by Tatiana from Talon Homes, who we learned a little bit about earlier on. And she does, as you said, these fantastic niche products where she'll find, homes that aren't in the best place. As in, when I say the best place, I don't mean that locationally. I mean in terms of just how it's, being maintained over the years. And she showed us the this plot a couple of weeks back, and it was incredible. The house itself is not in the best of conditions, but I'm sure Tatiana will be able to put it around and create, as you can see here, this absolutely incredible contemporary modern type build with, I think it's got 5 bedrooms. They've all got their own bathroom, and that's coming for raise real soon. I think that's going to be coming in 2021, if I'm not correct, David. With a projected ROI of 21%. And Tatiana, the absolutely lovely developer that she is, if it goes over time, she's actually basically said that she'll be able to raise the return on investment if time goes on. What is it, up to 18 months, I think. So no, it looks like an incredible project, and I'm also really glad that this is the first one I've been able to sink my teeth into as the marketing manager. So it's really, really great.
Excellent. No, thank you for that overview. So the equity raise is for 160,000. So bank lending's in place, the planning requirements all in place, just really ready to get stuck into the project. Projected ROI of 21%. As Aisha said, if that does go over the initial time allowed, then the ROI will increase slightly. And this should be a 12-month project, but obviously COVID, uncertainty, unknowns, it may stretch out to 18 months. But again, you'll be able to access the full offer document on our platform and see all the information about it. Now, I believe, Aisha, we have a project webinar for Tatiana, and it's actually during the day next week.
It is indeed. So we're going to be doing a project webinar for Oak Gardens with Tatiana. It's coming through at 11 a.m. Next Tuesday. Really excited about that. It's going to be nice to dive into it again and find out more information on the raise before on the project before we go for raise. So it's really, really great.
So you can see the bit.ly link on the screen, so you can screenshot that, or you can quickly have a look at that and get registered for it. But you can also record your interest when you go onto our homepage. You'll see the coming soon thumbnail for this particular project, Oak Gardens. What you can do is actually leave an email address and amount that you may be interested in investing if it checks out. And that's very useful to Tatiana and to us, just in terms of who's actually looking at the project with a view to possibly investing. So record your interest if you want to be on the webinar next week, 11 a.m. next Tuesday. We've gone for a daytime one this time because the evening doesn't always suit people. So we're doing a daytime one to capture that market. And then we'll probably be announcing on Tuesday when this will actually go live for investment. So we'll make that announcement probably on Tuesday. So yeah, if there's interest in it, then by all means get on, and we'll look forward to having you on Tuesday. And of course, Tatiana will join us. So you'll hear directly from Tatiana about this project. So that brings us to next week. I'm really looking forward to next week. I'm not sure, John, if you're going to be able to make it next week, possibly not when your body clock kicks back in. But the plan is we are going to be having on our fundraisers who successfully raised funds in 2020 on our platform. We've got a number of deals obviously going on at different phases in different parts of England primarily, and in fact one in Wales as well. And we're going to have the fundraisers on and just get an up-to-date of what's actually happening on site literally that week as we close out the year. And we'll be hearing from the fundraisers about their journey as they raise funds, what they found worked well, what they felt could have been done better. I think it'll be a fascinating insight and a very valuable insight, John, to hear from the fundraisers themselves, sort of at the more towards the end of the process. I think that'll be valuable.
Yeah, lessons learned as to what it was really like to actually finish a race.
Yeah, and we obviously head into 2021 where some of these projects will be nearing completion, and investors will be looking at getting their money back with their ROI, all things being equal, and that's where it gets interesting. I think one of the benefits of property crowdfunding is that if a fundraiser delivers a good job and delivers on their projected time scale and return on investment, the investor is more likely to go with them again if another deal comes up, maybe even invest a little bit more second time round. So you can get into the situation, John, where you have a fundraiser who brings 2 or 3 deals a year, and sometimes it's the same crowd that follow them deal after deal after deal, and that is a bit of magic within the world of fundraising.
I mean, if you make money, why wouldn't you stay with the people that made you money in the past?
Very, very much so. Yeah, so that's what we're really looking forward to. So next week. So please encourage everyone to join us next week for our final one. I may even convince Aisha to wear a Christmas jumper next week. So if you want to see Aisha's Christmas jumper, then you better tune in next week. So that is us for the day. Thank you very much for those who have joined. Again, great to see such a super crowd on. I know we're heading towards Christmas, but we do appreciate everyone who takes the time to join us. So any last goodbyes from Aisha and John?
Just Merry Christmas, Happy New Year if I'm not here next week.
Yeah. And thank you very much, guys. Thank you for having me always. And yeah, Merry Christmas if we don't see you next week.
Yeah. Sure. Brilliant. Okay. Stay safe, everyone. And hopefully we do. See you next Thursday at 10 a.m. All the best. Bye-bye.